Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my November 2021 wrap up. I'm gonna apologize right up front here, guys. I am sick. I have a cold. November, weird month, right? I started out the month coming back from my work trip, which left me with about a week or two of just low mental health. Barely any reading was done. And then there was a week where I was doing decently well, and then Thanksgiving hit, and the week of Thanksgiving I had 3 days where I had terrible vertigo and didn't read a single word, audiobook or physically, and then Thanksgiving, and now I'm sick after Thanksgiving, which means that I'm doing very little reading. I still managed to do some reading, it's just way less than I normally do. I normally hit somewhere between 12 to 15 books, and this month I managed to read 8 books, one of which will count towards December's TBR bingo, but we're going to talk about it here because I finished it, so why not do it? I also understand that 8 books is like a lot of people's ambition. That's what they hope for. That's what they aim for every single month. And that I am not here to say that that is small beans. I'm just here to say that, you know what? I had other priorities this month, and I'm really glad that I made the decision to put reading a little bit on the back burner for myself. Let's just get into it really quickly. So the first book I read this month was Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassel. I always say her last name wrong, and I think that's actually the closest I've gotten to it being correct. This book is about our main character. I've suddenly forgotten her name, but that's fine. She is a siren, and she can sing and basically force people to do whatever she wants them to do. This is a contemporary fantasy world, so it is like fantastical paranormal elements mixed along with like contemporary day settings. Now there is this man called the Bargainer, and he can be called in for people to make bargains with, and so he does something for them and then they have to do whatever he wants back. And if he doesn't ask for something right away, he will give them a bead. Now, most people have 1 or 2 beads in this world, if they have any at all. Our main character has over 300, and the Bargainer has never called in one of her bargains ever. The story picks up, it's 2 timelines. So the first timeline that we are following is our main character when she strikes up her first bargain with the Bargainer. And then our second timeline is when she is an adult many years later, because I think the first one she's like 14, many years later when the Bargainer starts to call in the favors. So this was a really cool concept, and I feel like there were some parts of it that I enjoyed, but overall I felt like the author just kind of like missed the mark for me. The writing wasn't horrible, but it didn't stand out as anything special to me. The characters felt very flat and one-dimensional. I didn't believe the romance. It was so insta-love in both timelines. I was like, why are these 2 people being together? Why are they falling for each other? I really don't understand it. But there were some elements that were really interesting to me. One of which was the fact that our main character is a siren, and that she quite literally was very moral gray because she could force people to do whatever she wanted, and her main job, I think, is some type of bounty hunter, and so she would quite literally track down these people who did horrible things and force them to confess, or film them confessing, or force them to repay whoever they had stolen from, stuff like that. And so she was using this gift in kind of a bad way, but for good. And I really liked that about her. I also really liked the main villain of the story. He's not introduced until like right near the end, but I thought he was really interesting and someone I wanted to learn more about. But overall, the plot was lacking, and I just couldn't believe the romance, which is basically the only other reason why you would read a book like this. So I ended up rating it a 2 out of 5 stars. I know that Laura has written many other new adult, smutty fantasy romances, and I'm not sure at this point if I'd be willing to check any of them out. This one didn't hold much promise for me, and I know that I won't be continuing on with this series, but I feel like some of her concepts sound really good, and I feel like that's something I always say and then I'm disappointed. So I'm really on the fence about whether or not I personally will be picking up another book by her. Next up, I read Not Even Bones by Rebecca Schaefer, which I'm gonna say first off right here, I loved this book. It's my second favorite that I read this month, and it only managed to be beaten out by something else because that something else was like beyond amazing. This book is a YA dystopian. It's kind of like a horror fantasy contemporary book, It has a lot of different genres that it'll fall into. I will be continuing on with both of the sequels in this book, just so you will know right here. Before I even start telling you anything about it, I loved this book. So this is a book where we are following our main character. I am foggy brained right now. I should have taken notes on these characters' names because I'm not going to remember any of their names, unfortunately. Nita. Her name was Nita. Okay, we're following our main character, Nita, and she kind of works for her mom. Her mom is a paranormal creature bounty hunter. So she hunts down these paranormal creatures and kills them, and then Nita's job is to dissect them so that they can sell them on the black market. And so the whole entire world has contemporary setting, people like us, but also has these paranormal creatures. And what was really cool is a lot of them were paranormal creatures that I don't necessarily recognize in a lot of other paranormal stories. There were some that I had never even heard of. I'm not even sure if our author made them up or if the culture and folklore was from another culture that I am not familiar with, but I felt like I learned stuff when I was reading this book, at least about paranormal creatures. So our main character has to face a lot of problems after her mother kidnaps a certain creature who is very humanoid in shape, and our main character starts to get a conscious about everything that is happening. And I won't be spoiling anything else that happens, but this book had some amazing things to say, some amazing tropes, and I haven't even gotten to tell you about like the main part of the story yet because I feel like that's spoilers for some things that happen. But oh my god, it was so good. I was kind of shocked that this book was newer. I think it was like a 2018 release because it kind of felt like at the beginning of YA dystopia when books were like really good. And if you don't know, I love YA dystopia. I love the good, I love the bad. I digest that shit. It's so enjoyable for me. But this one just like really stood out to me. I loved the characters. I felt like all of them were super well rounded. There's a character whose name is COVID, with a T at the end, and I listened to the audiobook and I had a really hard time because I definitely thought he was COVID. So that was a little confusing, but no points against the book for that one. That was just personal me being insane. It was dark, it was gruesome, but it wasn't like so much so that I was struggling to keep going. Next up is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. So this book is my favorite book I read this month, and it will be in the top list of books for 2021. I loved this book and I will sit here and gush about it. I talked about this in Goodreads Readers Also Enjoyed for my favorite fantasy, the one where I read Goodreads Readers Also Enjoyed books, and I loved this book. It was so good. I rated it 5 stars first off. I feel like that's kind of obvious, but here we go. I rated it 5 stars. In this book, we're following a large cast of characters. I guess it's not super large. I think there's like 3 or 4 people we're following. Oh, there's 5 POVs, but one of the POVs is kind of a group of people instead of like one particular person. Anyways, it's just the story of this war that is about to start and these different people all across this land slowly coming together. They don't realize they're being drawn together by like fate or elements or destiny or whatever you want to call it in order to form this band of people who are eventually going to be used to fight off this oncoming war. It reminded me of a lot of other fantasies that I really enjoy, such as Game of Thrones and Stormlight, where it's kind of building up to something else happening. This book really wasn't focused on like a plot happening. It was focusing on getting to know this world and getting to know these characters and kind of seeing what they do with each other and without each other and who they really are as people. And it was just fantastic. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this book. There was a fight scene in this book that I was so invested in. I was on the edge of my seat. I was listening to it. I had my headphones on and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I never listen to fight scenes. I like zone out when fight scenes happen. I don't care about battles. I skim read them. I just don't care. But this one I was so freaking into, and it was done so well. The world really feels like it existed before this book was written, and it feels like it's going to continue to exist after this book is finished, which there are 2 more books in this series, and then there are other books in this world. So I can't say, that the world doesn't continue, because the world definitely does continue. But it just felt like Joe Abercrombie really put thought and care into this book and planned for things. Now let's talk about the characters really quickly. So we're following kind of 4 characters that are important to our storyline, but really there is like a 5th POV that is important somewhat, but it's the group of people that I'll tell you about in just a second. So our first character up is Logan. He's the first one you meet. He is a warrior. He believes that his whole entire clan and family have been killed off, and he's kind of wandering through the wilderness trying to figure out what he is going to do with his life and kind of what comes next for him. And he's kind of just grabbing onto any person who's near him to give him a purpose in life again. We're also following Proctor. That's his title. I just always forget his name and everyone just calls him Proctor, so that's what I'm going to call him too. He used to be a swordsman for the king and was captured during a battle years and years ago, and he was tortured. He is disabled now. He cannot function super well, and when he came back to his current king, the king made him a torturer, and so now that's what he does, is he tortures people for a living, and he trains other people how to torture people for a living because he has great experience in how to do it. We're also following Giselle, which if you've watched that video, you already know that I have a mixed relationship with this boy because I love to hate him. I freaking feel like he's one of the worst characters that I've ever read, and yet every single time that he spoke on page, I was so into it, and I just wanted to see bad things happen to him. I wanted to see his life get ruined. I was happy that he was not happy, and it's such a weird place to sit with someone because like normally you're cheering on your heroes and you're not cheering on the people you dislike, but I'm sitting here cheering on bad things happening to someone I hate. He's a swordsman. He came from a noble family, so he really hasn't tried hard in life. He's kind of just been given his position, and he is training as a swordsman. I believe it's some type of like fencing in order to be in this competition for the king, and he is also a soldier in the war, but the war hasn't started yet, so he's kind of seeing the war coming on the cusp, like it's coming towards him, but he's just worried about this competition that's here right now kind of a thing. We are also following Pharaoh, who, oh my god, I freaking have a crush on her so hard. She is an archer. Her people also have been killed off, and she is seeking vengeance against soldiers that are coming into her land, and she's kind of forced to put that on the back burner in order to eventually allow the justice to happen. I forgot, we're also following Captain West, which he is a soldier above Giselle. His POV isn't super important to the story, but his sister is, and we only get to see his sister through a few different people's eyes, but Artie is really important to the story. I'm not going to get into why she's important because that might be some spoilers. And then the final group of people that we are following is Logan's old like army buddies group. Logan thinks they're all dead, and they all think that Logan's dead, and they're kind of wandering through the wilderness too, figuring out what they should do now that their chief and commander is gone. Fantastic, loved it, can't wait to read before they're hanged. I'm pretty sure that's Joe Abercrombie's first book. I can't believe it. I think it is. Next up is my first physical book that I read this month, and that is Kingdom of the Cursed, which is the sequel to Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. I loved the first book. I have an entire reading vlog on this book, so if you want to know some really in-depth thoughts and opinions about it, I'll have it linked somewhere, but this book kind of let me down, and I do genuinely feel like it's because it had a sophomore slump. There was a lot of world building, there was a lot of slowness, there was kind of a lack of plot, and the characters didn't develop really in a direction that I thought they were going to, nor did things happen in the book that I necessarily wanted to happen. Through most of the book, I was kind of confused as to what I even wanted to go down in this book, but all I really knew is I wanted to see more of hell, and I wanted to see more of the 7 deadly sins, and I wanted to figure out more about our main character Amelia's sister's death, which I feel like we really didn't get much of until right near the end of the book, and I did enjoy the ending of this book enough that I will be continuing on to the 3rd one when it comes out, although this one was just released, so it's going to be at least a year, I feel like. I didn't love it, and I was kind of disappointed, and I did end up skimming large chunks of this book. So I rated it a 2.5. There were some sexy scenes in here, which was like a step up from book 1, which book 1 was very YA, and this one is much more new adult, but I personally didn't feel like they were that greatly written, and I feel like they didn't develop enough into the scenes. Like, the scenes didn't have enough time focusing on them because we had way too many times where it was like something interrupted our main characters right before like they were really about to get serious with each other in the sexy times, but I'll let you go watch that video if you want to know any more really in-depth thoughts about it. Maybe I should tell you what Kingdom of the Wicked is about. Our main character, Amelia's twin sister, is found dead, and Amelia accidentally summons one of the princes of hell, Wrath. So each of the princes of hell are named after one of the 7 deadly sins, whichever sin they most exude, and so she gets the angry one, of course. And so he and her go to investigate her sister's death, and they run into a few of the other princes. Next, I read The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter, which is a dark thriller. It is about these 2 girls who, at a very young age, right when the book starts out, 2 men come into their house and take them into the woods and try to kill them. And then we are following the whole entire family many years later, kind of coming to terms with what happened to them, trying to heal, trying not to heal, whatever. And another big horrible event happens in their town to another young girl, and most of the family members are lawyers, and so they are trying to figure out like who to defend, who to prosecute. Karen Slaughter just has a easy breezy way of writing where you really get dragged into the story and you're pulled in and you're just there enjoying yourself. I have read 2 books by her now, and this is not the end of them. Didn't like this one as much as the first one I read, but to be fair, I loved this one. I really enjoyed it. I sobbed. I read this for my thrillers reading week, which I will have linked, of course. I sobbed so hard. I actually didn't get it on camera, but I cried for about 30 minutes while reading this book because of one of the awful atrocities that happened to one of our main characters. There are lots of trigger warnings in this book. It's been a little bit and my brain is a little bit foggy, so unfortunately I am just gonna have to ask you, if you are worried about trigger warnings, to look them up about the book before you go into them, because I'm just pulling a blank right now. My brain hurts. I love how Karen Slaughter writes her characters. They are fascinating, they are flawed, they are hard to read about sometimes, and yet they are so real and so relatable. I don't think I said already, so I rated that book a 4-star. Next up, I read Never Saw Me Coming by Vera Kurian. Fantastic book. I really enjoyed this one as well. Now that I have had this one put down for a few weeks, I will admit that I see some flaws in it, but I really enjoyed it and I thought it was fantastic, and it's something I think I would read again. So we are following 3 people in this program, in this college program, and they are part of this deal. They are psychopaths, and they have agreed with the college, the psychology department, to be studied in return for a 4-year free tuition. So they're getting to go to this college and they're getting to be studied by this college. Our main girl is Chloe. She has a vendetta against this boy named Will, and she is hunting him down and stalking him and wants to kill him. And when the book starts out, you don't know why. And so that's why she came to this college, really. She didn't care about the program or anything like that. She wants to be closer to Will so that she can plot his revenge. We are also following this boy named Charlie, and he's been at the school for a few years now. I think he's in his like 2nd or 3rd year, and he has a girlfriend. He is really succeeding, but these murders start to happen at the school, and it appears that this person is killing off the psychopaths in this program. So Charlie gets really invested and kind of starts to pull this team together of these 3 characters that we are following. Our last character, oh my god, what is his name? What is his name? I'm forgetting his name. He basically believes that he is faking it, that he's not really a psychopath and that he shouldn't be part of this program, but he's going to take full advantage of it anyways because it's a free tuition and he's had a hard life. And I believe his sister died when he was a lot younger, which is why people believe that he is on the path to psychopathy. It was fantastic. There's a murder mystery that you're following, but you're also following someone who wants to commit a murder, and you're following these 3 characters who do not care about any of the other people but are still working together. I really enjoyed it. It's all set against a college setting. It is definitely more of like a new adult book. I definitely went into it thinking it was going to be more YA, and it's not like it was super graphic or anything, but there was kind of a descriptive sex scene. I really enjoyed it. I rated it a 4 out of 5 star, which even with my thoughts over the past few weeks changing on the book, I think is very valid opinion. I was leaning towards a 5-star through most of the book, but I personally didn't like the whodunit at the end. Next up, I read The Light of All That Falls by James Islington, and this was my book club's pick for the month. This is the third and final book in the Hideous trilogy, although there are going to be more books in this world which really affect kind of how this book came to its conclusion. This really is kind of a coming of age story about a few different characters on the brink of war. Weird time travel jumps, there's lots of fighting, there's lots of confusion. I really can't talk about this book because it is the final in the series and I don't want to spoil anything for any of the other books or this one for anyone who hasn't read it, but I really enjoyed this series. It's a really good epic high fantasy. You kind of start out with your characters being a lot younger, and as the series goes on they get a lot older. I rated this one a 4.75 out of 5 stars. This is the second time I've read it. This is the same rating I give it both times, which is fantastic. I love when my ratings don't change on rereads. And finally, the book that is part of December's TBR bingo, but I'm going to be talking about now, is The Thousand Deaths of Ardor Ben. I have a reading vlog about this. It just came out this past Monday, so if you want to know some details, check that out. But this is a high epic adult fantasy series about this con artist who is contracted, that's not the word, contacted by a man in order to steal the crown from the king. This is a trilogy. All 3 books are out. I have been talking about these books for about a year now, and I finally sat down and read this one. Saying all of that, it was a bit of a disappointment for me. I will not say that this book was bad. I really enjoyed large sections of this book and I found myself really being pulled along for the ride. I just think that the writing could have really used some work, and I think that the pacing could have really used some work, and I think that the characters could have really used some work. But this is a debut novel. I think that the author will be getting better from here. I'm excited to see where things are going. I'm on the fence about whether or not I'll be continuing just because they're so thick, and I found myself skimming large sections. So basically any part of the book that wasn't part of the heist or the con that was going on, I was skimming because I didn't care about it. And our author, I feel like, should have focused a little bit more on the con, especially because that's the main thing that's mentioned on the back, is I thought I was going in for a con job, and the main focus, the main plot was a con job, but there was so much world building, so much info dumping, so much that it was kind of taking me away from the story. Along with that, I did mention that his characters could use a little work. I felt like they were kind of flat. I will agree that if you like The Lies of Locke Lamora, the book mentions that on the back, that you will like this one. That's true, you will. I personally did not like The Lies of Locke Lamora because I did not like Locke Lamora. I hate that man. I think Ardor Ben is kind of a watered down version of him, so I was able to tolerate him a lot more than I was Locke Lamora, but I feel like a lot of the side characters where I started out really liking them didn't develop anything other than what they originally first were when you met them, and I wanted them to be much more well-rounded and much more thought out, but it wasn't horrible. There were parts I was really into, and I feel like the cons were really well thought out. There were lots of twists and turns within them. I like how the magic is used in this book. It is based on dragons consuming different elements, and then what they release to the public is then used to allow different kinds of magic, basically through powders, and I haven't seen anything quite like it. I rated it a 3 out of 5 stars, and like I said, on the fence about the next 2. So those were all the books I read this month, but I briefly want to mention on the fact that while I read 8 books in November, I DNF'd 7 books. I will not be going into great detail about all of these books and what they are, and my DNF for the year video will be coming out pretty shortly, within the next month, so I might go more in depth there, but let me quickly tell you all of the books I DNF'd and quickly why I did it. First up, I DNF'd Small Favors. I don't like the author's writing style. I've read a book previously by her. I felt like the pacing was really slow, and I don't really like puritanical settings. Next, I DNF'd Ascension, and you can watch that in the same video where I read The Blade itself. It was bad. The dialogue was so poorly written, and the logic behind the world and how these characters acted, bad. Next, I DNF'd My Heart is a Chainsaw. I don't like slasher films. Next, I I DNF'd Rebecca. I don't like gothic stories. It's the classic Rebecca. I need to know this, and I need to continue reminding myself that I don't like gothic books, and when I see that word in a summary, to not pick that book up. I then DNF'd A Touch of Darkness. This one reminded me a lot of Rhapsodic. So if you liked Rhapsodic or if you liked A Touch of Darkness, I recommend you check out the other ones. It was just really poorly written and I couldn't take it any longer. The characters' motivations were non-existent. It was bad. Next, I did decide to put down The Bone Shard Emperor. I got the arc of this book and I requested it because I read the first one, The Bone Shard Daughter, and I enjoyed it. I rated it a 3 out of 5 stars, but I expected more from it, and I guess I thought that by reading the sequel, I was going to be getting whatever that something more was, and I wasn't feeling it in the first few chapters. So I kindly thanked the publishers. I wrote a review about the first few chapters, and basically what I can say is if you enjoyed book 1, you're going to enjoy book 2. It is the same exact thing, but I didn't absolutely love book 1 enough where I felt like I needed to read book 2. And then finally I DNF'd Sea of Ruin. Boy, I made it 60% through this book, and I'm not totally sure it'll be put down forever, but let me tell you, every single chapter had some type of sexy scene. This is a new adult fantasy romance about pirate. I might finish this book, to be honest. I don't know. I will be talking about this book in a video that one day will be coming out, so I'm not going to go huge in depth here, but I found what I like, and I've now found what I don't like, and one of the things I don't like, and it's good that I know this now, is torture in sex when it's non-consenting. Final thing before we leave is I am constantly trying to get my physical TBR down, and I can say that for the first time in a while, I was able to actually do that this month, and that my physical owned TBR is at 20 books. I'm hoping to continue getting it down through the month of December. It feels so good to have it finally at 20. That's where I've been aiming for a while, and I just haven't quite been able to do it. I'm really happy with that, and I wanted to share something that I am proud of. There were a lot of books I wanted to get to this month that I wasn't able to get to, but I still have them on my TBR. I can still get to them. It doesn't matter that I didn't read them in this month. It'll be perfectly fine. So let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, and let me know if you have a wrap up for the month of November. I'd love to talk to you more about books down below. I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I will talk to you in the comments. Bye!